Welcome to the Path Forward podcast. I'm your host, Augie Gillarducci. The Path Forward podcast is brought to you by U-Turn Health and Second Opportunity. And the purpose of the podcast is to interview primarily people that have been through the judicial system, ended up incarcerated, and have worked their way through that and have stories to share about how they were able to successfully re-enter and what their life looks like now. So my guest today is Jason Doty, and Jason and I met by a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and she actually told me that you've got to talk to this guy. His story is great, and it certainly is. So Jason, welcome, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Augie. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you and I are going to have a conversation, and we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be listening in on this conversation through their tablets inside facilities. We've got, we're available on the outside as well through traditional podcast channels. So, we encourage those on the inside to tell their families about the Path Forward podcast, so that their families will check out what we're talking about and especially hear the stories of reentry, because families are as involved in reentry as anything. And so for them to hear encouraging stories, I think is very beneficial. So Jason, would you start out and tell us a little bit about your, where you grew up, things that you enjoyed doing when you were younger, that type of thing? Okay,
great. My story is not the best story as far as childhood goes. My favorite thing was getting to be around my grandparents, because they had a farm, and it was a place of safety for me. My mother, bless her heart, wasn't made to be a mom. And so she was pretty abusive, and she loved to date men that beat the mess out of her and me too, since I was 2 years old. And so by the time I was 15, I'd run away from home. But my grandparents' farm was always my favorite thing, because it was a safe place that I could always go to. But being 15 and free of all the abuse and the craziness and all the madness of my childhood, I was locked in closets for weeks at a time at 8 years old. I was cooking my own meals at 7, because she was just gone for weeks at a time and just would leave me there. So I became kind of feral, is the way I describe it. And so by the time I was 15 and I had left and ran away from home to find my own way anyway, had to have been better. I thought that freedom meant that I was an adult and that I was ready for the world, but I was really just a feral child. And so I ran into people, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, that taught me how to steal cars and how to steal things to make a living. And it was the only way I could eat. And so I got really good at boosting cars and stealing things and had great ideas, but I always was smarter than my own good, right? Most people would just go steal a random car. I was like, well, why don't we go to a dealership and take 10? Seemed like you would work smarter, not harder, right? So we did that. And of course, I was almost 18 years old. I was just about 17, a little over 17. And we got caught and got charged with 6 counts of grand theft auto. I did. And so I was looking at prison time because I was about to be 18. But I'm old enough now that back then I was one of the last ones that the judge offered to go into the military, or I could go to prison. And I was like, well, sign me up. Military saved my life, though. I enjoyed it. I went into the Air Force. I was in there for years, 8 years. And but while I was there, the thing that had saved my life and took me away from the streets of Memphis and what I had to do to survive almost killed me. So an IED was put into a little girl when we were overseas. And it was exploded next to the group that I was with, and my best friend, who was attached to me at the time, saved me. He pushed me out of the way, and it killed him. And so I was mentally messed up at that point. PTSD is the term. But I come from a long line of toxic males. We don't talk about our problems, and we don't have problems. You just suck it up and you move on. And, drinking will take care of it. Or, when drinking's not enough, I would find some drugs that would help me drink more. And eventually, after a little bit of that downward spiral happened so fast that I was in blackouts attacking lampposts, dogs, mailboxes, girlfriends, whatever was in my way, and not remembering it. And so I quickly quickly got into the court system. And I was released from the Air Force, obviously, after I'd come back, having problems. Started getting into court, started messing with the same judge, seeing the same judge every time for him. I think I racked up nine aggravated assaults in less than 6 months from blackouts. Don't remember any of them, but then when they showed the videos in court, I was like, well, that's me. It's pretty amazing. It's not an excuse that I was blacked out. I just didn't remember it. But the evidence, there's nothing I could say. I was like, well, I guess I did it. So, and this time they weren't trying to offer me any options of that nature to, go and do something instead of go to prison. He was trying to throw the book at me. And so I was fighting all that. I ended up getting my life together. I got some help at the VA and started talking to people about the PTSD and what was going on and the survivor's guilt that I had and things that I had seen and fighting these court battles at the same time. And I kind of got my life back together. Believe it or not, while I was still fighting the court battles, started my own little business to try to make some money. I met a woman, got married. We had a kid, and within 3 months of having the kid, she had almost died giving childbirth, and so did the child because of now we know negligence on the hospital's part. But 3 months in, I had just left the home to go to the store to get something for her when I got a panicked phone call, and she said the baby had fell off the changing table. So I rushed back, got the baby. It was seizing, and did CPR in one hand, called 911 in the other, tried to calm her down, got it to the hospital, saved my son's life. The hospital, the doctors patted us on the back. They called us heroes, said if our quick thinking is what saved him. My military training is really what kicked into gear. I didn't think about anything. I just went into save mode as my son. And within an hour, we're upstairs waiting to see how he's going to be when a group from the same hospital that was responsible for his near-death delivery came up and decided that we were responsible for child abuse. So the reason I ended up doing 10 years in prison is because my wife was pregnant with our second son at this time, too. My son was 3 months old. So we were going to lose our house, everything. They were going to put both of us in jail until they figured it out and take away our one child, and put him in foster care at 3 months old. And I don't know any man that would allow that. So I lied and I told him that I was the only one home, even when I wasn't at the house. And I took the hit, and they sentenced me to 36 years in prison for that and all the things that I had piled up behind it, because it was the same judge again. Nobody wanted to listen. Nobody wanted to hear that it was an accident, because I had been this whirlybird tornado of destruction bent on PTSD hell. And nobody wanted to hear that an accident had happened. And I wasn't going to tell them that it was her that was home and not me. And so I went to prison, and 6 months later, or after 6 years of my sentence and fighting appeals and everything else, because we had the documents that showed that nothing could have ever happened to our child. It was an accident. We were able to prove it. And then obviously at the last minute too, it came out because one of our family members disclosed that I wasn't even home, and they checked my cell phone records, which they had never bothered to do, and saw that I was actually innocent because I was never at the house when it occurred. And so they never charged her or did anything like that. But, it took a total of 10 years to get out after I overturned that conviction, because even when I overturned my conviction, the judge was so unhappy and so vindictive, and our justice system is broken. He decided that in the state of Tennessee, once you're given a TDOC number, you have the same number for life. I don't care if you're incarcerated 100 times or one time, you always have the same number. And the courtroom is in charge of assigning that upon pushing you towards the Department of Corrections. Well, I mysteriously, once overturning my conviction and getting the time served with what I had, they mysteriously lost me in the system, and I got a brand new TDOC number. So I ended up having to go back to in processing and got lost and sent to one of the most deadliest prisons in the state. And I was stuck there for 2.5 years until I proved that I wasn't the number they thought I was.
So while you were away, at some point, you got involved in some programming to prepare for release. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I tell you all of that to tell you that sometimes blessings are in the details that you don't think are the ones you want, right? So I tell you all that the justice is broken and all that things that happened to me. But if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have ended up at Trisdale, and I wouldn't have run into Josh Hunke, who was with Persevere. And Persevere is a program that teaches coding and tech skills to inmates like me and felons like me to get us a job so that we could actually have some sort of financial freedom and real chance at a life when we get out. And so this man, Josh Hunke, he was an Army helicopter pilot. He saw my Air Force tattoo. I have tattoos, obviously. And said, "Hey, man, you in the Air Force?" And I said, "Yes, sir." We talked for a while. He goes, "Man, I got a program that you need to join." And so he told me all about Persevere. And I said, "Well, where do I sign up?" And that's where my life changed right on that day. So all those things may have happened to lead me there. But you got to say, maybe that's where I was meant to be.
Yep. So I get that. And so I'd like to take a minute here. And, when I do these conversations, I'm always remembering people on the inside. And I don't want to say especially, but certainly I remember those that have been incarcerated for a long period of time. And so when you talk about coding and Persevere and that type of work, can we take a few minutes to just talk about what computer coding is, what type of skills you were learning, and what background it relied upon, or what education it relied upon for you to be able to learn that skill? And then I'd also like to talk about the type of jobs or career that are available once you've achieved this program through Persevere. So do you mind talking about what computer coding is in general?
Yes, sir. That's a great question because I have been in classrooms when I first started with people who had been in for 30 years when I started and had never touched a computer. And they were like, "Well, how can I do this?" So that's a great question because what computer coding is, when we talk about coding, we're talking about applications. So whether they're websites or like Facebooks or any of these type of applications that maybe you've seen on commercials or, that you see all the time on TV. Designing those websites is like building a house. There has to be a foundation. There has to be a framework. And then once you have it built, there has to be paint on the walls and doors hung and windows installed and then shingles on the roof. And then there has to be wiring, right? So that you have electricity. Coding is just like building a home in that sense, but what you're building is technology frameworks. You're building the websites that people interact with, like the one you're interviewing me on now. Whether it's a Facebook or a Netflix or a Carvana.com because you want to buy a car. You're building the interface that a user interacts with, but you're also building the framework and the base and all the things that I just explained about a house, whether it's the design aspects, the paint on the wall, which would be the colors that you see and the buttons that you push on your computer, or whether it's, the information that it gets. Right? So maybe you want to buy a coat. Well, it has to go and see if that coat is available in some sort of information database. And then it has to return that instantly to you and say, it is available. You want to purchase it? And then take your number, your credit card number over the computer. All of that is building that framework. It takes a language, different languages we call coding languages. And those languages are anything from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Java, Python. There's all kinds of crazy names, right? But they all do something very specific in that building of the structure of the home of coding, if you will. And what we teach at Persevere is how to be that mason or that carpenter of technology, to build those frameworks and keystrokes and ones and zeros that build these beautiful applications that people use.
It's great. That was a great story, great analogy. It's something that I certainly was able to follow, so I can picture that. So Persevere is an organization, and I have to say that I was introduced to Sean Hostman, who is the founder and CEO, and I've known him probably going back to 2019. And that's when he was really just getting it off the ground. I mean, to really, have a presence. But will you talk about Persevere and what they do? Because one of the magical things about it is they work with people that are currently or formerly incarcerated, and also their families. I know in Tennessee they've got a program that not only are they working on the inside, but in the communities they're giving children of people that are incarcerated the opportunity to learn computer coding and develop skills. So will you just talk a little bit about Persevere and what their presence is like inside a facility?
Yes, sure. Sean Hoseman, amazing mind, a felon himself, convicted felon, got out, had this idea that we needed something to have a life, right? Because no one's hiring felons. You can't live off minimum wage. Am I going to go back to slinging drugs? Am I going to go back to stealing cars? What am I going to do? And who's going to take me? He solved all those questions with one swoop: technology. If I can teach people technology skills, we can get them real jobs with real wages with a real chance at life, right? A real chance.
Yep.
So that's why we focus on justice impacted, justice involved in the community. And we teach mostly just behind the walls in prisons, where I started as well. And so what we do is it focuses on the jobs that are out there now. What skills are people looking for and paying for? And most of the ones we do teach start at the 6-figure mark. And you're like, well, I'm a felon. I'm not going to make no 6-figure check. The great thing is Persevere is not just about teaching you coding and technology skills. It is a full wraparound project that you are assigned what's called a TES, or a technology and employment specialist. It's just yours. That person is in charge of making sure that you know how to do resumes, talk to people, and do all the things that are required to get a job or an interview. And they're also in charge of finding us employment partners that say, hey, I'm interested in Persevere and what they do, and I support it. So you know what? If you've got somebody that can do the work, I will talk to them and I will offer them a job if they can do it. You got my word. We even have them sign a piece of paper of commitment to that. So that's one side. And then the other side, if you're someone like me that was dealing with PTSD and some mental health issues that I hadn't dealt with, we also have the whole side of the case manager side that you're assigned. And that person is there to talk to you, to help you with therapy, to help you with family things. Like you said, maybe we had one participant that was having so much trouble and it just fell apart. They ended up running a food train to that person's house, putting money in their account until they could get up, because, I mean, once you're in your family, right? And so it's not just coding skills, it's everything that gets wrapped around that. But yes, we do have multiple programs. Tech Alliance is one side of us that we teach just like one-on-one tech skills. We have Families First, where parents and children can come together at 2 different programs and learn, so that we're not just helping you change your life, we're changing generational change. So the next generation under you has a chance. And then we also have what's called Epic Youth, which is just for kids. And it teaches through gaming and different things like Roblox and Minecraft, if anyone knows what that is. It took me a minute too. My 8 and 9-year-old had to explain to me what Roblox was, and I work in software, okay? So I get it if you don't know what it means. But it's these games, and they teach the kids coding and tech skills through those games, and they are just loving it. So yeah, it's Persevere is an amazing program.
So I want to go back on something you were talking about from a little bit of a wider perspective. I remember when I was away, so that was 2005 to 2017, and for a lot of that time, finding employment with a background was a real challenge. Excuse me. And guys would return and they would say they couldn't find any work, or the work they could find paid minimum wage, and they just couldn't make it on that. And so I want to provide this from a factual basis. There is a movement out there now and the movement's been around for a number of years, 5 or more years, but it's called Fair Chance Employers. And these are employers that do sign a commitment to say that they're going to hire people with backgrounds, and they are clearing away some of these archaic rules that maybe the company had on its books, saying we won't hire anybody that has a felony conviction, or we won't be involved with anybody that's been arrested. I mean, some of them take it to a level that makes it completely impractical. And I say that to say that there are opportunities out there. but it still comes down to the skills that we have, right? They will hire people with backgrounds, but we have to have the skill to do the job. They're willing to set the background to the side if we have the skill. We can't just rely on the fact that we have a background that somebody is going to hire us into a good paying job that provides benefits and vacation time and that type of thing. So you talked about that, and I wanted to just go back and kind of visit on that, because I know that we provide in our resource guide, we provide the list of companies that are fair chance employers. And it's like 500 names or more now. And these are national companies that they've got locations throughout the country. And I can remember when that list of, they used to call them second chance employers, and then they made it a little broader to call them fair chance. But I can remember that when that list was 10 or 12 companies, and very few. So it's encouraging, but again, it goes back to the skills. So you learned on the inside the skills of coding and that type of thing. A couple of questions specific to the program you were in with Persevere on the inside. How long were you in the actual program, the teaching portion, where you were learning the skills, not the wraparound services, but the actual teaching portion?
So the actual program is about a 12-month program.
Okay.
So you have 6 modules. It's broken up into 6 segments, and then it takes about a year to get through all 6 of those to do what is called to become a full stack web developer. So that's front end, which is user facing, the things users, like people that swipe the screen or click the buttons. That's the front end. That's things dealing with the things users will play with. And then there's the back end, and that's things that the user doesn't ever see, but it makes the magic happen. So the first 3 modules is front end. The back 3 modules is back end. And together they make you a certified full stack web developer. And so that's a 12-month program inside the walls. That's what I took.
Okay. So obviously somebody's got to have at least that amount of time to go and so on and so forth. So, okay. And then I guess I'd like to advance it now to say you completed this program, obviously, and where did your career go from there? I mean, you finished the program, and kind of walk us through from the day that you completed the Persevere program and were a full stack developer, and then to today. What's actually gone on with your life there?
Right on. To go back one step, though, you don't have to complete the program in prison. If you're released before that year is up, you do have the ability to continue outside.
Wonderful.
So I just want to make that clear.
That's great information.
So me personally, I didn't have anything. So I think it's good to give the listeners some background too, especially if they're incarcerated now, because it's different on the inside, right? I didn't have anybody. I had nobody putting money on my books. I didn't have any resources. I had to hustle. I was a man all to himself. And then I didn't have anything on the outside waiting on me either. So I was kind of like a lone dog just on myself. And so I was like, well, I guess I better get my butt in gear. And so I took it seriously. And to this day, I'm the only person who graduated the entire 1-year program in 4 months in behind the walls, because that's how much heart that I have. It's not about how smart I was. It's because it's how determined I was not to not have a life, and to be able to do something for myself, because I saw really quickly how critical this pathway was to a real future if I wanted it, because nothing else looked good. And so I got to preface with that. But inside, day in and day out, you learn the skills. Like I said, if you show up at a construction site, you got to learn how to use the hammer and nail. You got to learn how to frame. You got to how to pour concrete right, depending on what you're doing, right? I think so many people that are incarcerated have been blue-collar workers too, have done good work on building things or making things. So everybody kind of understands the analogy of building a home. But day in and day out, what you do is you come into class and you learn those same type of skills in building the things that people are using in technology on their iPads or their phones or all the things, right? And so day in and day out, it doesn't take a math wizard. A lot of people get scared about, I don't know math and I don't know this. The great thing is if you want to go into construction and you don't know anything about framing, but you're great at laying roof tile, you can always be a roofer. It's the same thing in technology. You may not be good at writing mathematic algorithms. Trust me, I'm not. I can't stand it. But I'm amazing at designing the user interfaces and the buttons, which isn't math related as much as it's understanding how design works. So there's something for everyone in these coding situations, right? Different depending on what you're really good at and what you might find that you were good at and you didn't even know. So day in and day out, you come in and there's these easy to follow modules. There's you learn how to do it hand on hand. So you get an example and you do it here. And every day you get a little more knowledge. I've worked with people that have been in for 35 years that are now instructors as well in the community working for Persevere that had never touched a computer in his life. And now he is one of my coworkers. And I've never been so proud of a human in my life. And he still jokes to this day that he don't know what a mouse is. And it makes me laugh. But did that answer your question?
It did. So you have alluded to the fact that you now work for Persevere.
Yes.
And so what is your position? What is it that you do? And how are you interacting with the population?
So I'm lucky enough now to when I started in Persevere, it was just a baby in the prisons. So it was a petri dish of itself. The old saying that they were flying the plane while they built it.
Right.
I was a part of that. I always say we came up from the mud together. And so I was behind the walls, a part of that first little inkling, that baby that came out of Sean's brain. And it has evolved and gotten stronger. And as I got out, I was offered a job, gratefully. And so now, because we've done such great work in the state of Tennessee, now we also have a community program for the first time ever. So now we're not just teaching behind the walls in this state. We're reaching out to the streets and saying, hey, let's help you change generationally what the outcome can be in a non-traditional way, right? And so I am a lead instructor in the state of Tennessee for community instruction for families first. And so I teach 2 classes a day. I teach specifically front-end development. So that's like I said, the user part where they get to play. The users are actually pushing buttons or looking or swiping things. I work and teach people how to make those things. And so I also work on the side. I'm on the AI task force and the social media force now on Persevere, which are 2 little teams that we put together because I'm really good with artificial intelligence. And so we've started making AI bots for the company that basically people laugh because they say I created an AI that will take my job, but actually it just gives me vacation time. So that's good too. So because our students, right, life's on you. And that's the beautiful thing about Persevere is it's there to meet you where you are. And that's what I love about, that's why I'm so passionate about it too, besides that it saved my life and gave me a real chance, is that we actually go out and try to meet people where they are. So maybe it's a single mother, right? 3 kids, full-time job. The only time she gets to sit in front of a screen is from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And there's not any instructors on the screen then. Another instructor of mine, the first graduate from Persevere, Alex Marsden, we created an AI instructor that will talk to you and instruct you and teach you any time of day, and they have access to it. And we're in the beta testing of that. So we've got a few students testing it out now to see if it's going to work well. But so far, it's been amazing. So that I can be there 24 hours for my students on their time in case they can't be there during class time, right? And it's been amazing. And so that's what I do now is I'm part of whatever group needs to help us move forward. And now we also have some amazing people in the job side of what we do. So we have a whole new lady named Itzel who has made partnerships. Like we were talking about that list that was so skimpy years ago.
Right.
It's getting bolder and bigger every day. And you'd be amazed who's on it. But what I love about it is we've taken our students and our graduates like me and so many others that have done this. And they said, these are what they can do. What jobs do you have? And at the same time, they said, now look, these people are this, and this. Would you be willing to offer them a job? And they say, we love what you guys are about. Yes, I would hire anybody you sent my way if I have a job ready for them. And so they sign these letters of commitment, and that list, sir, is getting longer and longer and longer. And it makes me smile so big because I can remember those days when there might be 10 people. Like my favorite fair chance hire in the world is Rogue in Ohio. They should be on your list. They make CrossFit and gym gear, the bars, the weightlifting stuff, the dumbbells, and all the things. They've been one of the Fair Chance hirers for years, and they're one of my favorites because being in prison, my therapy was weightlifting. And so now I am a gym rat, and I lift a lot. So Rogue has always been one of my favorite because they're Fair Chance. But I think the biggest thing is that anybody can do it. If you think you can't, you should give it a try for sure. Persevere is a great way to do it. And if not, if you have family members that you're worried about on the outside, there's more than likely we're in your state. So, reach out, look online, perseverenow.org, and give it a shot,
So we're bumping up against time here, but I do want, like we do in every episode, give you a couple of minutes to just look into the camera and talk to the men and women on the inside. Those that are sitting there, and as we both know, there's dark days that occur, and there's a lot of uncertainty of what's going to happen when my day comes to release, and who's going to hire me, and how am I going to be able to take care of my financial responsibilities, and what's my life going to look like. So just take a couple of minutes and maybe offer some words of encouragement to those men and women that are watching this as they're sitting in a prison cell.
Yes, sir. I think we live in a different time than it was just 10 years ago when I was in. We live in a different time. You had mentioned gig economy, and what that means is that there's a lot of jobs involved with little applications that people use. People make whole six-figure incomes now just by making little videos they put on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. And these kids are 16, 18, 19 years old. There's a lot involved with that as far as understanding the technology, but they're making a fortune, and most of them have never been to school, right? That's what we mean by gig economy. It's working through these applications and never really going to a business anymore or clocking in on a clock. It's changed the game. So there's opportunities out there for people like me when I got out, and you, because you can work anonymously, you can work remotely. You don't have to be in an office. There's opportunities of all kinds out there, especially in the tech industry, to do this. And even if you don't think you can't do it, let me tell you something that I learned. When you have had to sleep every night in your boots because you have to, because that's how dangerous it is where you live every day, if you've had to fight for every ounce of respect day in and day out, whether it be through the system and the officers or the other inmates, if you've suited up and showed up every day and did the best you could and put that one foot in front of the other to do your time. I don't know if a lot of you know this, but trees in the wintertime move all of their sap to the roots in the winter. They move everything out. That's why the leaves die. And that's so that when it gets cold and it freezes, the tree doesn't explode and die. When I think when we're in prison, we go into what's called an emotional winter. Same thing. All of our sap goes to our roots so that we can function and survive what we're going through emotionally, mentally, and physically. If you don't think that that gives you strength and power for going up against a job with someone else that's never had to experience what you've been through or come from what you've come from, you're sadly mistaken, because you're a warrior. And I see it day in and day out. The people that I work with, that I graduated with, that I teach and that are graduating, I just had a graduating class come out, and there are already 4 of them. 2 of them are going to Columbia University as interns. These people, one had never had a job or a driver's license and still had $60,000 worth of fines in the state of Tennessee and didn't know what they were going to do. And now they're being offered a job at Columbia as an intern in this field. And what I saw was this, is that people underestimate the amount of courage, perseverance, and strength it takes to suit up and show up to live the life that you're having to live right now. And so you don't give yourself enough grace in thinking how much of a warrior you are. Because you have heart, you have determination, you have strength. And when you get out in that workforce, nobody wants it as bad as you because it'll never taste as good to them as it will to you. And I speak from experience because I work with people every day, not at Persevere, but just in the world in general, that complain about their coffee. that complain about the sun being too hot, that complain about having to get up to go to work. And I'm like the stupid little dog that don't know better. I'm out there going, let's go, let's go. You know why? Because it's a gift. Because they don't know what a gift is unless it's stolen from you. And so my words of wisdom and hope for you is that remember, anything you learn and anything you do to better yourself, you're always going to have the advantage because no one will ever have known what it was like to suit up and show up and come from the mud every day like you have. So let that be your advantage, and you will be successful. And one thing about Persevere specifically is they won't do it all for you. But if you do use that heart and you show up and suit up and you are the warrior, they're going to meet you halfway and you will not be sad. I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole life. And I'm just a little trailer park trash from Memphis, Tennessee. Was never supposed to be nothing. Wasn't even supposed to be alive. And look at me now. And I'm grateful to be here.
Well, Jason, thank you. Your story is amazing. Your words of encouragement are amazing. I think this also is educational. For me, certainly, listening and learning about computer coding and what that career entails, and I suspect for many of the men and women that are currently in the system, maybe some they're recently in the system. They've used an app before, they've used Facebook before, they've been on websites before, but never actually thought about having a career that's involved in designing and building them and something they might be interested in. So again, thank you for giving us of your time today and sharing some of your experience and wisdom. And thank you to those that have listened or watched this episode of the Path Forward podcast. We certainly hope you've enjoyed it, and we encourage you to check out the next one, which will be released 2 weeks from when this one is released. So thank you.